Hi everybody, welcome back to the Sales on Demand Show. I am Adam Schneider. I'm your host and the guest, and I'm also the sound man. And today we are going to be talking about a few different things. I believe this is episode 88. We are closing in on the final countdown to Christmas. It is the most wonderful time of year, so I do have some updates for you. And I have a little bit of a rant today. But first, I will talk about what is going on in my own life, of course. I like to do this. So, things are going well. It is getting busy. I find myself just pretty much working as hard as I ever have and harder. Working from home. It's not easier to work from home. I would say in some cases, in many cases, it's kind of harder to work from home than it is to work a regular job because you're never really not working. You're always thinking about, what's my next task? What am I supposed to be doing now? And it kind of gets a little bit overwhelming in many cases, You're just trying to get everything done, and there's no set time period to do it. Nobody's telling you what needs to be done. It's just like, okay, well, I got all this stuff that needs to get done, and I got to find a day to do it. So that's what I've been faced with. But so far, there's some benefits, of course. One of the benefits is that, if I find myself tired during the day, I can just take a nap. Taking a nap in the middle of the day is perfectly fine because I can do some work in the evening. It's not a big deal. Oh, looks like it's episode 87. I'm sorry for that mistake. I will prostrate myself in front of all of you, and I owe you all a beer or some donuts or something. So yeah, that's what's going on with me. I've been putting up the listings as hard as I can. I just finished doing some stuff that I never thought I'd be doing. I've been working for Rachel Raffay with her low-hanging system, and she has put me in charge of much more than I thought I would ever be in charge of. And I feel honored that she's giving me so much responsibility, and it kind of makes me feel like my knowledge actually has some value. I know that I know what I'm doing, but this sort of validates that. So of course, I do spend a lot of time doing personal one-on-one coaching and the weekly coaching. I do that twice, and then we just had a whole bunch of other coaching sessions. So my whole life is just a whole bunch of Zoom meetings, but it's fun. I enjoy it. I like doing this. This is something that suits me. And then on the weekends, I go and I get abused by Her Majesty the Queen with the Canadian Armed Forces. But it is definitely kind of abuse that I signed up for, doing really hard workouts and stuff like that. I love that too. And it gets me out of the house. So of course this coming weekend, I'll be going and sleeping outdoors again. I call it involuntary camping, but it's basically just a field exercise. We're going to be doing some training out in the snow, learning how to survive outdoors. This will be the third time I've done this in cold weather, and to be perfectly honest with you, I'm kind of looking forward to it. The first time, I don't think I enjoyed it as much because it was really cold, but now I've kind of got that under control. I went out and bought a really nice pair of boots so that my feet wouldn't be cold, because that's really the only part of me that really gets cold is my feet. So if your feet are warm, then the rest of you is kind of comfortable. So buying this new pair of boots kind of helps. And now I can just go and enjoy myself out in the snow, which is something I never thought I'd say. All right, so today I thought I'd talk about a few things that I see new people doing that are a tremendous waste of their time, effort, and energy, and just a few things that you guys can start doing right now to get moving. I know that it's December 15th, but if that's the case, then we're pretty much done here, and you're planning for next year, but we still have one full month of really, really intense selling, and the sales have been spiking like crazy. In fact, I'll tell you how much I'm up from last year. I am up on Etsy something like, I've got the numbers right in front of me here. It's this month so far. Oh, that's not the right one. I was going to say only at 21 orders. That's not true. Yeah, so I've had almost 100 orders in the month of November, and the increase year over year is almost 300% for me. So I have almost 4 times as many sales this year as I did last year, and that the percentage of increase is going up. So if I look at 7 days, then it shows that I'm 420% higher, which is 5 times higher, right? Every 100% is a doubling. So I'm almost 5 times higher for sales just in the last 7 days as I was at this time last year. So that bodes really well for my overall sales. I should reach probably, I'm thinking between 25 and 35,000 on Etsy just for the next month. So it's going to be insane. I'm going to be sitting and filling orders until my eyeballs turn into dry sockets, but this is just part of the game, right? And it is kind of fun just to see how many orders can come in and how quickly they come in. And then, of course, on Amazon, I'm about between 45 to 50% higher than I was last year, so that is also good. And that just goes to show, like, 2020 is going to be amazing. And really, I mean, how much of that is 2020 and how much of that is just the extra work I've put in? I would say that about 65% of those extra sales is just the fact that I sat down for the last month and I listed so many more things. I have customized listings that are selling on Amazon. I have loads of extra listings on Etsy that are selling really well. And all of that work is just basically 1 month of full-time work has quadrupled my sales on Etsy and done, about 40% better on Amazon. Amazon is harder to scale quickly, but when you scale it, you can scale it really high. So that's my plan for this year, of course. All right. Well, I'll lead off with a couple of these things that I wanted to talk to you guys about for new sellers, really. And you know what? Sometimes maybe old sellers could stand to hear this again. But if you're a brand new seller, you probably have no idea what you're doing, and you're going to make mistakes. And the goal here is that you make different mistakes than I did. So if I share with you some of the things that I did that I wish I hadn't done, or that I hadn't wasted so much time doing, then it'll help you, move forward in your own business and avoid the mistakes that I made. And, maybe you'll make some different mistakes, but they will be brand new mistakes. And so you'll be better off than you were if you hadn't heard this. So this is something that I have talked with some of the coaching students that I deal with. I've really seen what new people get bogged down in, and I'm kind of finding myself repeating the same thing over and over again. And it's difficult because on Facebook, when you post something, as soon as like 2 or 3 posts get posted, newer than that, then those posts get pushed down. So, I basically am just going to be repeating myself over and over again. But that is the life of a coach, is that you just keep repeating yourself. Okay, so first of all, if you find yourself with no sales, what could possibly be the problem? Okay, now this is the thing I get people all the time. So new sellers, they start doing some work and they get really excited, but they're not really as focused on the important things as they will be later on. And I was the same way, so don't think I'm trying to tell you guys that I'm better than you, because I did all the dumb things. I asked the stupid questions, and I'm grateful I'm past that, but I'm sharing this with you because I know it's going to happen to you, and I'll save you the trouble. So there's basically three things that new sellers do or don't do that kill their sales. So the first thing that new sellers are doing is that their listings are they're just kind of random. They're not very focused, and that's because you don't know what's going to sell yet. So you're just sort of grasping and struggling and reaching your hands out there, and that's fine. Your first 150 listings are not going to be amazing, and that is just a fact, right? Right now, I can put up 50 listings, and probably 10 of them will get a sale, whereas a new person might put up 150 listings, and maybe 2 or 3 of them get a sale. So it's just a matter of knowing what has worked in the past and focusing more on that, what has worked, rather than, having some kind of superhuman knowledge. So once you make your first sale, that gives you an amazing amount of information. You might be thinking, oh, one sale is nothing. But that's not true. One sale tells you two things. Number one, that somebody trusted your shop well enough to buy from you, meaning that, if you have an Etsy shop, you should be putting, something in the about yourself page. You should put your picture in there and make sure people are comfortable buying from you, generally speaking. People don't want to buy from a shop where there's no logo or something like that. So spend a little bit of time, put those things up there, and it makes your shop look a little more professional. It doesn't take much work to get that shop looking really professional, or at least kind of professional. So make sure, secondly, that your listings don't have any spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes. So I keep catching these kinds of things with new sellers. They're not capitalizing the first letter of the title or something like that, and it just doesn't look professional, and it doesn't look appealing to customers. And even if you correct yourself later on, if you have listings in your store, particularly on Etsy, on Amazon this is irrelevant, but on Etsy, if you have listings in your store that they're just trash, then it's just better for you to go back and fix those ones, because it's pretty easy to do that, rather than just leave them there. On Amazon, you can pretty much just leave everything, because people aren't visiting your store on Amazon. They're visiting each individual listing, and they'll buy it or they won't buy it. And many listings won't even get people visiting, right? Because Amazon is a huge and giant warehouse of many listings. Etsy, on the other hand, they're going to give you some traffic right off the bat. They're going to at least put your listings up there. Now, the third thing is that, maybe there's 4 things here. So the third thing about not getting any sales is that you're not creating products that are, amazing, or you're not creating enough products. So there's 2 things going on here. First of all, you need to have lots and lots of products right off the bat, because you're going to accidentally stumble upon something that sells, and you need to really, grasp around in the dark for a while to find that thing. Some people find it right away, and some people don't. Most people don't. So if you find yourself, you have 150 listings, and they're all fairly diverse, you've got enough listings for the time being. So the second thing you need to focus on is your titles and the tags. If you're not putting tags, and you're only putting like 3 or 4 words in your title, you're really not putting enough information in there for Etsy or Amazon to show your product to the people who might buy it. Now, that's not to say that a 4-word title is worthless, because I have sold products that had a 4-word title. I had one product that had a 4-word title, 4 words in it, and it did make 1 or 2 sales on Amazon. I kind of got lucky with that one. So the truth is that you need somewhere between like 8 to 12 words, and they should be very specific words to that listing. So, if you're selling coffee mugs, you got to put in not just coffee mug, but you got to put in teacup, right? Because some people aren't searching for coffee mug, they're searching for coffee cup, or they're searching for tea mug, or teacup. So putting in not just coffee mug, but teacup really opens up, it almost doubles the potential number of search phrases that your product could be found for. If you're selling something that has to do with a carpenter, you can put a related term such as tradesman, tradesperson in there. Carpenters might be dads, so it's not a bad idea to put a dad in there, or son or uncle. Just something that you think might relate to it and increase the number of searches that's going to show up for. Now, if you're making a carpenter themed mug, you're probably not going to put carpenter mom in there because, let's face it, it's pretty rare for moms to be carpenters. It's not impossible, but it's quite rare. So you want to go with what makes more sense and what the most likely target's going to be, rather than trying to, just put every possible target in there. It is possible that your mom or your aunt will be a carpenter, like a trades carpenter, but it's not likely because most carpenters are men. Same with most iron workers, they're men. Plumbers, maybe there are more women in plumbing than men, but again, it's what's most likely, right? So you kind of have to guess at that and just get to know some of the things that you're using as niches or something like that, so that those titles can be a little bit more effective. So that's pretty much it for that. So I also see new sellers, they're constantly wasting time looking for images. And I see this all the time. If you are a new seller and you're like, oh man, what font should I use? What images should I use? Where do I find pictures to use in my products? Okay, slow your roll. Don't use any images. Just avoid it, at least at first. Because the least effective thing that you can do right off the bat is go and try to find cool images to put on coffee mugs. Because I'll tell you this, you may not like to hear it, but nobody buys coffee mugs with pictures on it, unless those pictures are very specific. So little cartoons tend to do well, but those aren't things that you're going to be able to find just for free. And in any case, if you know how to draw little cartoons, little pictures of cats or something like that. One popular thing is the little cartoon of a cat that's flipping the bird, or a dog that's flipping the bird, giving the middle finger. That's kind of common. But other than that, pictures and images, they just don't work well on coffee mugs. And they definitely don't work well on t-shirts. T-shirts and pictures are just not a thing, really. They can work more on masks. So if you're doing a mask and you have a picture of something, it really has to be something that would attract someone's attention, though. Now, for face masks, pictures and text can work really well. So I've a couple of products that sell really well with just a picture, and I have a few things that have text on them that also sell decently well. They're not best sellers by any stretch, but they do okay, and I make money. So if you're looking into getting to masks, again, don't dive right in and create 100 different mask listings. Try to spread yourself out a little bit more, because eventually you're going to find something that you're kind of good at, and then you can focus on that. But putting all of your eggs in one basket is not a good idea for a new seller. So that's that's a few tips and strategies for new sellers. But what I really wanted to talk today to you guys about is this cultural thing of COVID-19 and these lockdowns. Like, this is driving me crazy. And when all this COVID stuff started in, I think it was March or April, I actually made a bet with my oldest daughter, who is also my only daughter. And I said, well, tell you what, I bet you, because she was really worried. She was kind of stressed out about the whole thing. And I said, listen, I bet you that by December that there will be nothing in the news about COVID. There won't be any COVID stuff in the news at all. It'll just be a memory. Maybe there'll just be a few reports of, 10 people caught COVID in this place or something like that. I mean, this was back when we called it coronavirus. Now everybody calls it COVID. So I made a bet with her about that, and I said, if I lose the bet, you buy me lunch. Or if you lose the bet, you buy me lunch. And I said, if I lose, I'll pay you $100. So it looks like I owe her $100 because this COVID thing is not fading. It's not going away. And the people who are sustaining it are the same people who are guilty of all of the crimes against humanity. The government and the government's enablers. The Karens and the Kens and the people who just... they don't have any ability to mind their own business and live their own lives, and they just cannot fathom that other people might want to go out and live their lives as well. So, just starting with a few facts about COVID, something that we've learned over the last 8 months is that the number one thing is that children are basically immune to COVID in terms of death. There have been a few, and of course, these cases get widely distributed, but they are very rare. There's been a few cases where a young person has caught COVID and had like a really awful time with it and like a stroke or something like that, maybe permanently disabled, maybe not, I don't even know. Some people are like, these kids, there's so many of these kids that had strokes and all this stuff, and I'm like, no, there's really not. There's a few that have, but how many children do you think have caught COVID? Well, it's a lot. And honestly, it's very hard to detect because kids don't get very strong symptoms from COVID. And the second thing about kids and COVID that you need to know is that they don't spread it very easily. And that is one of the biggest things about this shutting down the schools that is just so anti-scientific. So I've been listening to a lot of people talk about this, and one of my favorite people on this is Tom Woods. He's got a couple of really excellent YouTube videos and some podcasts, and I'll link to that in the show notes so you guys can have a listen. But he has gone out and collected all of the information, okay? He's not an epidemiologist, and I don't care if he is or not, okay? This idea that you can't comment on COVID if you're not literally a scientist on the front line is ridiculous because all of the information is available to everybody. The actual scientists have been studying this nonsense, and I call it nonsense facetiously, but they've been studying all this stuff for a long time. It's been 7 or 8 months now. I don't even know. Like, we're almost at the end of the year, and this started really in February. So we could call it 10 months if you want, 9 months. But there's been a lot of study going on, and the actual data has been fairly consistent in terms of who is vulnerable to COVID and who is not. And whenever I tell somebody, and I have been very aggressive about this online because there are people in my community who are rooting for these lockdowns. I tell people that first of all, kids and young people, if you're under 40 and you have no health concerns, you basically have nothing to fear from COVID. I mean, any more than you would fear from the flu, which I have to remind people all the time. The flu kills 200 children a year, which makes it vastly more dangerous to children than COVID. In Canada, and I keep telling people this again, there have been no children who have died from COVID in Canada. One child died with COVID, but there was controversy around whether it was from COVID or with COVID, so I'm not counting that because it doesn't count. Kids die of cancer all the time, right? So COVID is not dangerous to children. Even if some children experience harmful effects from COVID, what is dangerous to children is isolation and lack of exercise and not learning and not being educated. Sitting at home and watching TV or playing video games all day is definitely not healthy for children. And if you shut down the schools and you don't let kids, go and interact with their peers or go to a friend's house or play sports, what do you think they're going to end up doing? They're going to end up sitting indoors, eating junk food, with nothing to do but play video games or watch TV. So, I mean, I cannot understand for the life of me how people assume that that is somehow better and healthier than kids going out and playing sports. So here in Alberta right now, they've put a temporary ban on playing indoor sports. And because it's winter right now, the only sports that anybody really wants to play are all indoors. So you can't play indoor sports, which basically means you can't play sports. So it's put a real damper on teenagers who go and play hockey or volleyball or anything like that. And the science behind this is basically absent. There's no science behind it. It's not a scientific decision. And it just makes me want to punch a hole in the wall, tear out the stud, and beat someone to death with it. And I only kind of half joking about that because it makes me so angry that we're basically putting our kids in the basement of our houses and keeping them indoors and destroying their mental health. One thing that you should know about kids is that in the last 9 months, over 75% of teenagers have thought about suicide, contemplated suicide. 75%. And if you don't think that 75% of teenagers contemplating suicide is harmful, then you're an idiot. You're just plain an idiot. All right, so that's a couple of my pet peeves about COVID and children, namely that we should be letting our kids go out and just living their lives. And you know what? If it means they can't see their grandparents or they got to see them at a distance, fine. I get it. It is more deadly to elderly people than it is to children. So it does make sense to restrict the contact between those two groups for a time being. But I'm not talking about a year. I'm talking about a few months. And we should be doing what they're doing in Sweden, which is called the controlled avalanche. Basically, if you're vulnerable to COVID, if you're in that group of people that it's over 65 and you have one comorbidity, maybe diabetes or something like that, then you isolate, you stay away from younger people, but then the younger people get to go out and live their lives, and they'll catch COVID and they'll get over it. And because we already know, and I've had people dispute this with me, but the people who know these things have announced this, that there is some immunity from COVID if you've caught it and recovered from it. They say up to a year, which could, I think it would turn into longer than that, but at least a year, which is great because we only need 3 to 6 months to do this. But here's the thing. If you spread these infections out over more than a year, if that immunity starts waning for the people who have been infected, then you lose it. You lose the benefit of that. So it's idiotic to try and spread this out. A healthy person who catches COVID becomes part of herd immunity. Right? This is what I was told about vaccinations, why vaccinations are super valuable, because of herd immunity. But now, the people who are pro-vaccination, you won't hear the term herd immunity out of their mouth because they don't believe in that anymore. Right? So one thing, I'm looking at a study right now, and this concerns kids going to school, right? There's a peer-reviewed study of 57,000 child care centers. And it says here, this is from the American Association of Pediatrics, there is no evidence of child care being a significant contributor to COVID-19 transmission to adults. And this has been consistent with previous studies, right? So there is no connection between schools being open and more transmission rates. So anybody who thinks that schools being open and that youth sports are terrible because the kids are going to catch COVID and spread it to their grandparents, there is no evidence that that is a widespread concern. Let kids be kids. Let them go outside. Let them be outdoors with people. Let them be indoors with people. They're not hugely risky. I know everybody says that, oh, kids are a bacteria factory, blah, 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 blah. No, the science tells you that you're full of crap, okay? I'm looking at the science here. You going to argue with the science, or are you going to just go your own way? So, that being that. Then there is the whole problem of the lockdowns being both ineffective and extremely destructive to both the culture and the economy and everything that makes life actually work. So, it started off with 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Everybody sit inside their house for 2 weeks. And I remember that there were people who were just like, they were kind of, what do you call it? Condescendingly saying things like, well, your grandparents went and fought, a war in Europe, so you can sit on a couch for 2 weeks. Well, what 2 weeks turned into 4 weeks, turned into 6 weeks, turned into 6 months, right? So how many 2 weeks to flatten the curve do we need to have? And here in Alberta, they were talking about another 2 weeks they call it a circuit breaker, which is, the theory is that, you stop all of the people doing stuff and working and going out and stuff like that for 2 weeks. It puts cases back down again. It helps the healthcare system adapt to the caseload. But what is the long-term strategy here, okay? This is all just a bunch of, trying to make something work for the sake of appeasing the COVIDiots. I heard someone today call them the branch COVIDians. So this has become a religion amongst certain people. And the people who are the most vociferous about this lockdown and COVID stuff are the people who it affects the least, right? You're not finding people who own restaurants and bars and small shops clamoring for lockdowns, because those people, they understand that lockdowns cause them tremendous harm. They would like to feed their children. They would like for their business to continue past December, right? So the people who are clamoring for lockdowns are people like teachers and government workers, people who are retired already, or people who work a job that maybe it's a grocery store and they're working. They're working probably harder than anyone else. And of course, healthcare workers, man, those guys love lockdowns because they see themselves as being like the tip of the spear fighting COVID in the hospitals, as if we haven't had infectious disease and all these kinds of things around for, the last 4,500 years, right? All of a sudden, COVID has become the only problem ever. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of things about lockdowns that you should understand and know. Namely, you should be against them, no matter how short they seem to be, no matter what the justification for them is made. They are harmful. They are worse than COVID by a long shot. And then I'll give you some numbers about death that you may not already know, because we're surrounded by death. Isn't that a cheerful thought? Hey guys, don't be afraid because we're surrounded by death. But the truth is that we are surrounded, and people are dying all the time of things that nobody even thinks about. So one of the things that is never discussed, even on the news, even on like alternative media sites, people just don't talk about this, but I think it's a pretty big deal. And it's something to be concerned about for sure. 250,000 people every single year die of preventable medical errors. Do you know what a preventable medical error is? Well, the reason it's called preventable is because it's something that somebody screwed up and it kills somebody. Or it's something went wrong in a hospital, you caught some kind of illness in the hospital, someone gave you the wrong medication, you had an allergic reaction to the medication, and it kills you. I actually know several people that this has happened to. A friend of mine lost his brother because his brother had an allergic reaction or some kind of reaction to a medication and just didn't wake up in the morning. He died, and he was only 30 years old. It was crazy. It was some kind of like schizophrenia medication, or no, maybe it was for seizures. He was an anti-seizure medication, and it killed him. So 250 people in the U.S. every year die because of these mistakes. And in Canada, it's 26,000. Now, so far this year, something like 280,000 people have died of COVID, right? So we're about even with those two numbers. Maybe COVID is a little bit higher, but I don't know if it is, because I don't know the exact numbers of people who die of medical errors. But I do know that if those two numbers are equal, then should not we be spending the same amount of energy fighting deaths? And, like, let's be honest, if, we're not going to have 280,000 deaths every year from COVID. It'll probably go back down, we'll probably have 80,000 deaths a year going forward. That'd be my guess. It's going to be more dangerous than the flu, and it's going to be something that we have to contend with from now till the future, but it's not going to be the same death rate going forward. And really, if you want to call it a death rate, because the people dying from COVID, in many cases, it's being counted as a COVID death, even if COVID was not the contributor to their death. If they had COVID, they tested positive for COVID, and they die, that's a COVID death, which to me is extraordinarily dishonest. But that's how they do it. So, even if you count deaths like that, still, 250,000 people die of preventable medical errors, and about the same number die of COVID. Then, on top of that, 90,000 people every year die of alcohol. So, that thing that nobody thinks is really, well, some people know it's dangerous, at least marginally dangerous. I'm one of them, because alcohol nearly took everything from me, and that's why I don't drink right now. But 90,000 people die from alcohol-related causes. Either the alcohol kills them directly, or they're killed in a car accident or something like that. But 90,000, that's a little bit shy of 100,000. That's a lot of people dying from a legal substance, right? It is restricted, but come on, how restricted is it, right? I mean, every single kid that I know has drank alcohol before they reach the age of 16. It's hardly a restriction that anybody pays attention to. More people die of alcohol poisoning certainly than drugs, although that's also pretty big too. About 90 to 100,000 people die every year of drug overdoses, and that number is going up. And for the first time in Canada, the life expectancy of a male has gone down 2 years because of drug overdoses. And we get between 400 to 800 drug overdoses just here in Alberta every single year. And that is the exact same number of people that have died from COVID in Alberta. Now, those two numbers, the alcohol poisoning and the drug overdoses, those numbers are expected to be 50% higher in 2020 because of the lockdowns, right? Now, between those two numbers, a 50% increase brings those two numbers in line with COVID deaths. So basically, we're killing as many people with the lockdowns just from alcohol and drug abuse and the increase in the death rate from that as we are from COVID. And we have no idea whether the lockdowns even prevented any deaths. We have no idea. There is no evidence that there's a significant decrease in overall death when you lock an area down to try and reduce the spread. Because you can't stop the virus. It is just unstoppable. But you can kill people by trying to stop it. So I'm not going to keep on going here, guys, but I just want you guys to understand that COVID is not a death sentence if you get it, right? Even 95% of people over 80 recover from it. And those are odds that I would take if I was over 80. My grandfather, he doesn't care. He's like, I want to see my grandkids. I want to see my great-grandkids. He's 87. I mean, he's as vulnerable to this as anybody can be. He's had 2 heart attacks and a triple bypass. Like the man is a tank, but he's not an invincible tank. But he has said, I want to see my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, because he could die. He might not die of COVID, but he could just die. And if we haven't visited him, if he hasn't seen us, then we've lost so much. And you know what? If COVID comes and he gets 6 months less of life, but that 6 months is filled with family get-togethers and, people being happy and talking and sharing their lives with each other. I mean, is it worth it? Giving up 6 months so that you can actually spend time with your family? I would do it. I would do it in a heartbeat. And I think that most people agree with me. All right, guys, that's it for this episode. I promise I won't do this very often, but I had to, this was exploding in my chest, and I had to get it off my chest. So we will see you next week. Have a good one. Cheers.